A mysterious book that fell from the sky made me think there was still a chance to change my fate. But the book made me dizzy, and then I found myself in an unknown place. The mysterious woman, who suddenly appeared, flew several silver knives towards me, which scared me and immediately woke me up. Who exactly is she? Was it just a dream that foresaw my ending? In order to prevent myself from heading towards a bad ending, I have decided to start looking for ways to avoid it and strive to survive in this world. Moen trembled as he picked up the purple book from the bed. He carefully held it with both hands, as if he had obtained a treasure. Ah, it seems. He clung to the book as if he had grabbed a lifesaver. He cried tears of joy while hugging the book, thinking that this was something brought to him by God that could change his fate. God still hasn't given up on me. Although I'm a loser boy destined to be cannon fodder, having cheat ability is different. Before the blood on his head could be wiped off, Moen was already sitting on the bed, flipping open the book with excitement. He couldn't wait to see what methods were recorded inside that could change his destiny. He confidently said to himself, "From now on, I will change the original ending and change my destiny against all odds. As the saying goes, my fate is up to me." After turning the book over to one of the pages, Moen was suddenly dumbfounded. He stared blankly at the book, staring his eyes wide open, then blinked again, as if he couldn't believe that he had misread it. He thought his reading direction was not quite right, so he changed the direction of the book and read it again. However, he still found it very strange. He flipped the book back a few pages, wanting to take a look at the rest of the content. As it turned out, the content after the book was no different from what he had just seen. Moen found that there was actually no content in this book at all. This is a blank book. Moen looked at this book without any words and was very surprised. Wait, what is it? Is this a book without words? Does that mean I need to activate it in some special way? While placing the fingers of one hand on the bridge of his nose, Moen thought hard about what method the book needed to use to display the words. According to this Western European world setting, coincidentally, his fingers touched the blood flowing down from his head. Moen did not notice the direction of his blood flow. His fingers moved gently, and some blood flowed down his cheeks towards his chin. A few drops of blood dripped from his chin. Blood dripped onto one page of the book placed on Moon's leg. The pages quickly sucked the blood into the book, and then suddenly emitted black-purple energy from the book. At this moment, Moen realized that something was wrong. He lowered his head and looked at the book, noticing that it emitted a strange light, and the black-purple energy emanating from it surrounded him. The book suddenly floated out of his hand and flipped frantically in front of him. The sound of flipping through books echoed throughout the room, making him increasingly feel that something was wrong. During the process of flipping pages, a black-purple vortex gradually formed in the center of the book, followed by a huge suction force attempting to suck Moen into the book. Moen had no idea what happened. He looked at the strange book in front of him in surprise and cursed loudly. "Damn it! What's going on?" The book frantically flipped through pages while absorbing the blood that had flowed down Moon's head. "My blood." He crossed his hands in front of him to block it, and tried to lean back to prevent himself from being sucked in. However, the suction force is too strong, and Moon's hair is about to be sucked in. He looked at the current, uncontrollable situation and felt somewhat helpless. Soon, due to the large amount of blood absorbed by the book, Moon felt unusually weak. His eyes were almost closed, and the scene in front of him gradually blurred. He could only see his own blood flying past his eyes and dripping into the book. After a while, he closed his eyes and lost consciousness. Unsure of what had happened, Moon seemed to have been transported by the book to an unknown place. His hands were secured to a wooden board, and there were many bruises and cuts on his hands. His feet were also fixed on the wooden board, covered in many bruises and scars. Take another look at the front of Moon. He was stripped of all his clothes and had a collar and chain around his neck. Not only the face, but even the body was covered with many red wounds. These terrible scars and bruises are so numerous that he seems to have been abused. His body was trembling, apparently due to a physical reaction caused by excessive pain. Moon woke up from a coma. He slowly opened his eyes. He looked around in a daze and realized he was in a place he didn't know. It was pitch black around him, and he couldn't see anything clearly. Where is this? Suddenly, the voice of an unfamiliar woman sounded somewhere. Oh! This mysterious woman appeared from nowhere and suddenly approached Moon. She looked at him with a very frightening expression on her face. She opened her red eyes wide, as if trying to reflect everything about Moon in her eyes. You finally woke up. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Moon was startled by her sudden appearance. He looked in surprise at the unfamiliar woman in front of him, who couldn't see her exact appearance. Who are you? Then, Moon realized that his entire body was bound by chains, and he couldn't move. He tried to break free of these chains, but found that whenever he moved, he pulled at the wounds on his body. He was in so much pain that his whole body was trembling. Ah, it hurt so much. The strange woman stood next to him, with no intention of trying to free him from the chains. She said to him in a relaxed tone, "Pain is inevitable. It's all to make you remember." She extended a finger and gently brushed it across Moon's abdomen, then across Moon's chest. This made him feel very uncomfortable. Her fingers touched the scars on his body, causing him to tremble in pain. You don't know how heartbroken I am at this moment. You shouldn't be like this. How evil, how cruel, and how selfish you are. Moon wanted to refute her, but had to give up because the wound was aching faintly. He could only close his eyes, bite his teeth, and try to endure. You should bring pain to others instead of tolerance, and make everyone hate you. Only then can you belong to me alone. But you have changed. You have changed your heart. Changing your heart is not acceptable. She propped her hand on her cheek. Her red eyes looked like they were radiating a ghastly red light. She stared at Moon with eyes like she was staring at prey. With a voice that was completely different from the one she had just used, she said the most possessive words to him. But don't worry, no matter how much time it takes, I will purify you thoroughly with my love over and over again. She held several silver knives, and her eyes curved upwards. We will be together forever. Even death cannot separate us. She flew all the silver knives in her hand towards him, who was fixed on the wooden board. Moen felt fearful of her behavior. He opened his eyes wide, looking at the silver knives that were about to stab him with a frightened expression, and couldn't help but shout out loudly, "No, no, no!" Startled, Moen suddenly opened his eyes and immediately struggled to sit up from the bed. He observed the surrounding environment and found himself still in his room. He was panting heavily, with sweat all over his face. He still felt a bit dazed and hadn't recovered from his tense state just now. Who? That was just... Moen slowly calmed down. He covered his head, unable to believe that everything he had just experienced was just a simple dream. A dream? He lowered his head and looked at his hands, only to find that they were still trembling involuntarily, and he could vaguely feel the pain in his body. The scene just now seemed to be real. The pain still lingers on the skin. The dream had been too real. He picked up the purple book beside him, carefully observing it while recalling what had just happened. Before I fainted, I remember this strange book flipping through pages frantically and sucking away a lot of my blood. If it is really the precognitive dream brought by this book, was the tragic ending caused by something I did wrong? He opened the book, trying to find clues about what had just happened. As soon as he opened the book, he suddenly froze. The Book of Prophecy emits black-purple energy outward. The page that didn't have any content written earlier suddenly displays a few lines of red text. However, some of these lines of words were so blurred that it was impossible to see the prototypes of the words clearly, and only a few words were visible. The words that can be read clearly are "do not," "change," "for," and "fate." Before Moen could figure out what the other words on the page were writing, the Book of Prophecy turned into a black light and entered his forehead. However, without having to read the remaining words clearly, Moen could roughly infer the meaning that these few lines wanted to convey to him. He touched his forehead, furrowed his brow gently, feeling somewhat distressed about his current situation. Is this a warning to me not to change the original plot? Otherwise, I will have that kind of ending. But why? Wouldn't that end badly? At this moment, it was already dusk, and the sun was about to set. The sunlight of the setting sun shone into his room, and the gentle breeze outside the window blew the curtains gently. Moen walked to the window, and a gentle breeze blew his hair. He looked out the window at the sunset and muttered to himself. So in the end, all my ideas were just wishful thinking. In order to survive, I can only choose to actively move towards destruction. He leaned his chin with one hand and fell into thought. Suddenly, he came up with a good idea based on the ending of Moen Campbell in the novel. Wait a minute. Actually thinking about it, the ending of him in the original book doesn't seem so bad. At least he was still alive in the end. That useless young master lacks the ability to make a living and can only become a beggar after being exiled. But I am different. Having figured out the differences between him and the original Moen Campbell, Moen gained courage once again. He confidently lowered his head and watched as he clenched his fists, as if he had regained the drive to move forward. I am a battle-hardened working professional, forged through the relentless trials of the modern 996 and 007 work culture. Anyway, the subsequent plot of the novel doesn't mention what happened to Moen Campbell in the end. In that case, after being exiled, I can start from scratch in another country with the wisdom of modern people. The setting sun outside the window reflected on his body. He stood in front of the window, facing the fiery red sunset, and revealed a confident smile. The so-called aristocratic status was nothing to hold on to at all. It was nothing more than a privileged class obtained by squeezing the working people. As a genuine socialist proletarian warrior, I can still make a living in this world with my hands and knowledge. After a while, it was time for dinner. Moen changed his clothes and walked towards the dining room to eat. He gulped down the steak in front of him. He took a sip of the glass of wine held in his left hand and ate a piece of steak from the fork in his right hand. He enjoyed these delicious foods that he had never been able to eat in his past life, and temporarily put aside what he had just said in the room. Damn it, I've never tasted such delicious steak and this wine in my previous life. This wicked privileged class is so delicious. There are not only steaks and wine on the dining table, but also other delicious dishes and desserts. In his past life, he had never been able to eat so well. Moen ate these delicious foods and felt like he was in heaven. He covered his cheeks, enjoying these delicacies with a look of intoxication. The elegant and mature woman sitting next to Moen is the Princess of Campbell, Campbell, who is Moen's mother. She noticed that her son's mood today was a bit different from before, so she put down the knife and fork in her hand and asked him with a smile, "What's going on here? Moen seems very happy today." Haha, he must be looking forward to tomorrow's coming-of-age banquet. After all, that was one of the most important banquets in Moen's life. The slightly dignified man sitting on the other side of the princess. He is the Grand Duke of Campbell, Campbell. He also known as Moen's father. He inserted a steak and looked at his son beside him with a smile, answering the princess's question. Upon hearing her parents mention the topic of coming-of-age ceremony, Moen elegantly put down the utensils in her hand and replied to them with a relaxed tone. "Yes, father, mother, I am looking forward to it." The princess held her face in both hands and looked happily at her beloved son. "Tomorrow, my son will definitely be the most eye-catching presence at the banquet. I don't know how many noble girls he will charm." The Grand Duke looked at the princess with indulgent eyes and replied with a smile, "Haha, that's unacceptable. Moen in our family has a betrothed wife. If Princess Cecilia sees and becomes jealous, it will be difficult to explain." As soon as the Grand Duke mentioned the name Cecilia, the princess became somewhat unhappy. She hugged her arms with both hands, pouted, and turned her head to one side. I don't like Princess Cecilia. She is cold and not cute at all. She is simply not worthy of our little Moen." The Grand Duke comforted her and explained to her, "You can't say that. If even Princess Cecilia is not worthy of him, then no one is worthy." Moen supported his chin with both hands and smiled as he watched the interesting interaction between his parents. However, he was quietly commenting on what they said in his mind at this point. "My dear parents, how confident are you in your son? What kind of person is Princess Cecilia?" That is the third princess of the empire, the pure white girl who has received God's gift, and a powerful candidate for the empire's first beauty. In the novel, she gained a large following with her aloof temperament, and the contrast between being cold on the outside and hot on the inside. Wherever she goes, She is a highly anticipated presence. In the novel, Cecilia, dressed in glamorous attire, holds a wand and looks firmly into the distance. The temperament she exudes makes people feel that she is a graceful princess. Moen looked at his parents, who knew nothing, and shook his head gently. He was a bit speechless about his parents' current behavior. He recalled the bad things done by Moen Campbell in the novel and his bad character, and knew that he was not worthy of Cecilia at all. What kind of person is your son? Don't you realize it yourself? Only you will consider him a treasure in this world. The Grand Duke and the Princess were chatting happily under the sunset, and occasional bursts of joyful laughter could be heard. Moen watched them while expressing his thoughts in his heart. In the original work, both of you were good people, but unfortunately, you had such a son. According to the original plot, you will also be implicated in the coming-of-age ceremony event. After that, the entire Campbell family was forced to fade out of the core circle of the upper echelons of the empire and completely disappear from the story. He slightly bowed to his parents, indicating that he had finished his meal and left the restaurant first. Even though that book says that you can't go against your destiny, the fate of broken arm and leg, exiled and reduced to an invalid, is an opening that would be too difficult to turn around even with a modern mindset. I can't accept it. Moen walked towards the door with a determined stride. I have to think of a way to do something. I can't change my own destiny, but it doesn't mean I can't change someone else's. He tightened his tie and looked solemnly ahead, his expression as if he was about to make a major decision. Upon careful consideration, looking at the entire incident, taking action against the princes was not the real reason for my punishment and exile. Because I was convicted of treason and implicated my father, the Duke of Campbell, who held military power, fell into a power struggle and was purged by the imperial ruling class and the aristocratic class. This is it. So, on the premise that the outcome remains unchanged, I need to pull the Campbell family out of the entire incident as a life-saving talisman after exile. Additionally, I need to find someone to take responsibility. Speaking of taking the blame, there seems to be no more suitable place in this Western fantasy background world.